My brother pretended to have a life-threatening heart condition to steal my scholarship and ruin my future. 3 years later, he showed up at my apartment begging for forgiveness. But let me start from the beginning. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, I always looked up to my older brother Marcus. He was everything I wanted to be: athletic, popular, and effortlessly cool. I'm Vanessa, and at 15, I was just trying to find my place in the world. Marcus was 19, home from his first year at community college, and he seemed to have it all figured out. Our family wasn't wealthy. Dad worked double shifts at the shipping yard, and Mom managed a small grocery store on the east side. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house where Marcus and I had shared a bathroom our entire lives. The walls were thin enough that I could hear him talking on the phone late at night, usually bragging to his friends about some achievement or conquest. When I was younger, around 8 or 9, I tried everything to bond with Marcus. He played basketball, so I begged Mum for a hoop in the driveway. He listened to alternative rock, so I memorized every Radiohead album. He started learning guitar, so I saved up my allowance for 6 months to buy a ukulele, thinking we could play together. But every time I approached him with excitement about our shared interests, he'd just roll his eyes and tell me to stop being so clingy. The real trouble started when I turned 13. That was the year I discovered I was actually good at something Marcus wasn't: academics. While he struggled through community college remedial courses, I was getting straight A's in advanced placement classes. I didn't mean to outshine him. I genuinely just loved learning, especially mathematics and computer science. My math teacher, Mrs. Patterson, pulled me aside after class one Tuesday afternoon in October. She had silver-streaked hair pulled back in a bun and wore reading glasses that perpetually sat on the tip of her nose. "Vanessa," she said, her voice warm with excitement, "I've been teaching for 27 years, and I can honestly say you have the most natural aptitude for algorithms I've ever seen. Have you thought about entering the state mathematics competition?" I hadn't. The idea of competing felt foreign to me, but Mrs. Patterson's enthusiasm was contagious. She explained that the top 3 finishers would receive college scholarships. First place got a full ride to any state university, second place got $25,000, and third place got $15,000. For my family, any of those prizes would be life-changing. That night at dinner, I nervously mentioned the competition while passing the mashed potatoes. Mum's face lit up immediately. "Oh, sweetie, that's wonderful. When is it?" Dad looked up from his meatloaf, fork paused mid-air, and gave me an encouraging nod. Marcus, however, pushed his chair back with a scraping sound that made me wince. "Great. Another thing for everyone to obsess over," he muttered, then left the table without finishing his meal. I watched him go, my stomach twisting with guilt, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. Over the next few weeks, I started preparing for the competition. Mrs. Patterson stayed after school 3 days a week to help me practice. We'd work through complex problems in her classroom, the afternoon sun streaming through dusty windows, while she pushed me to think deeper, question more, explore alternative solutions. I loved every minute of it. I kept my preparation quiet at home. When Marcus was around, I'd hide my practice worksheets and pretend to be doing regular homework. But he wasn't stupid. He noticed Mom's excited phone calls to relatives, Dad's proud mentions of "our daughter the math genius" to his co-workers. The attention that used to be split between us was now focusing primarily on me. The competition was scheduled for early February at the State University in Eugene, a 3-hour drive from Portland. As the date approached, the tension at home became unbearable. Marcus would make snide comments about nerds who think they're special and how real success comes from actual life experience, not book smarts. I tried to brush it off, but each comment felt like a small cut. 2 weeks before the competition, something changed in Marcus. He suddenly became supportive, aggressively so. He'd ask about my preparation, offer to quiz me on formulas, even suggest we grab pizza together so I could take a break from studying. At first, I was thrilled. Maybe he'd finally come around. Maybe we could actually be close like I'd always wanted. I should have known better. The Friday before the competition, I came home from school to find Marcus sitting at the kitchen table with Mom and Dad. They all had grave expressions on their faces. My first thought was that someone had died. "Vanessa, honey, sit down," Mom said, her voice shaking. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she'd been crying for hours. Dad had his arm around her shoulders, his own face pale and drawn. "What's wrong?" I asked, my backpack sliding off my shoulder and hitting the floor with a thud. The sound seemed too loud in the heavy silence. Marcus looked at me, and for just a split second I saw something flash across his face. Satisfaction? Triumph? But it was gone so quickly I convinced myself I'd imagined it. "I went to the doctor today," Marcus said slowly, his voice catching. "They did some tests last week because I've been having chest pains and irregular heartbeat. The results came back this morning." He paused for dramatic effect, and I felt my heart start racing. "I have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. It's a genetic heart condition. The doctor said I could have a sudden cardiac arrest at any time. I need emergency surgery within the next month, or I might not make it to my 20th birthday." The world tilted sideways. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. I'd read about it in a medical journal article for my biology class. It was serious, potentially fatal if untreated. Young athletes sometimes collapsed and died from it without warning. Mum was sobbing now, pressing a tissue to her eyes. Dad's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. And Marcus looked scared. His hands trembled as he held up what appeared to be medical documents with official letterheads and complicated terminology. "The surgery costs $85,000, Dad said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "Our insurance will cover some of it, but we're still looking at about $40,000 out of pocket. We've got $12,000 in savings. We'll need to take out a loan for the rest, maybe a second mortgage on the house." My mind was reeling. $40,000. That was more than Dad made in a year. And then it hit me. The competition was in 8 days. If I won first place, that scholarship money could go toward Marcus's surgery instead of my college fund. "I'll drop out of the competition," I heard myself say, even though the words felt like swallowing glass. The scholarship money should go toward the surgery. "No," Marcus said quickly, too quickly. "No, you should still compete. You've worked so hard. I don't want this to ruin your dreams." But his eyes told a different story. There was something calculating in them, something cold that didn't match his words. For the second time that evening, I felt a chill run down my spine. Mom reached over and grabbed my hand. "Sweetheart, we're not asking you to drop out, but if you did happen to win, maybe you could consider other options besides using the full scholarship immediately. You're only 15. You have time before college. Marcus needs help now." The implication was clear. Win the competition, defer the scholarship or trade it for cash, use the money for Marcus's surgery. My future for his life. How could I say no? That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Marcus move around in his room next door. Something felt off about the whole situation, but I couldn't put my finger on it. He'd been having chest pains. I'd never noticed him holding his chest or seeming short of breath. He played pickup basketball 3 times a week and never seemed winded. But then I felt guilty for even questioning it. What kind of sister doubted her brother's life-threatening diagnosis? Maybe I just hadn't been paying attention. I'd been so focused on my own achievements that I'd missed him suffering. The next morning, Marcus was up before everyone else making breakfast. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, the works. "Thought I'd do something nice for my little sis," he said with a smile when I shuffled into the kitchen. "You need brain fuel for studying." We sat together at the kitchen table while everyone else slept. He asked me about my competition strategy, which problems I found most challenging, what my test-taking approach would be. He seemed genuinely interested, taking notes on a yellow legal pad like he was my personal coach. "You're going to kill it, V," he said, using a childhood nickname he hadn't called me in years. "I believe in you. And hey, whatever happens with the money situation, we'll figure it out as a family. Don't let that pressure get to you." But all I could think was, if I won, my brother would live. If I lost, we'd have to scramble to save his life. No pressure at all. The week passed in a blur of studying and worry. I barely slept, running through formulas and theorems in my head while staring at my bedroom ceiling. Mrs. Patterson noticed my distraction during our practice sessions, but attributed it to pre-competition nerves. 2 days before the competition, I decided I needed to see Marcus's medical records for myself. Not because I doubted him, I told myself, but because I wanted to understand exactly what he was facing. Knowledge made me feel more in control. I waited until the house was empty. Mom and Dad were both at work, and Marcus had mentioned going to his physical therapy appointment, something new he'd started, supposedly to strengthen his heart through gentle exercise. I crept into his room, feeling like a criminal, and started searching. His desk was cluttered with old homework assignments and gaming magazines. I rifled through drawers, finding nothing but old receipts and random junk. Then I checked his closet, pushing aside hanging shirts to reveal a small filing box on the top shelf. Inside were the medical documents I'd seen at the kitchen table, but something was wrong. The letterhead looked slightly off, the font not quite right. I pulled out my phone and searched for the hospital logo. It didn't match. Not even close. My hands started shaking as I examined the papers more carefully. The doctor's signature was illegible, generic. The medical terminology was correct but used oddly, like someone had looked up terms online and strung them together without really understanding them. And then I noticed the date. The test results were dated the same day Marcus had announced his diagnosis. Medical tests didn't work that fast, especially not for something as serious as cardiac imaging. I heard the front door open downstairs and quickly shoved everything back into the box, my heart pounding. But it was just the mailman. I had maybe another hour before anyone came home. I took photos of everything with my phone, then carefully replaced the box exactly as I'd found it. Then I went to my room and started researching. I called the hospital listed on the documents. They had no record of Marcus as a patient. I called his doctor. The number rang to a disconnected line. My brother was faking it. All of it. The heart condition, the surgery, the desperate need for money. He'd fabricated an elaborate lie to manipulate our family, to steal my scholarship money, to once again make himself the center of attention. But why? And how could I prove it without destroying our family? I spent that night weighing my options. If I confronted Marcus directly, he'd deny everything and probably come up with some explanation for the inconsistencies I'd found. If I told my parents without concrete proof, they'd think I was being jealous or cruel, doubting my brother's health in his time of need. No, I needed to let him expose himself. I needed to win the competition first, then watch what he did with the money. If he was really sick, he'd use it for the surgery. If he wasn't, well, I'd be ready. Competition day arrived with grey clouds and drizzling rain. We all piled into Dad's old Honda Civic for the drive to Eugene. Marcus insisted on coming along for moral support, even though he claimed the trip would be exhausting for his weak heart. Yet I noticed he carried all the heavy bags from the car to the building without breaking a sweat. The competition was held in a huge lecture hall that smelled like old books and floor wax. About 200 students from across Oregon sat at individual desks, number 2 pencils lined up like soldiers, scientific calculators at the ready. I found my assigned seat near the middle of the room, aware of my family watching from the observation area above. The first section was pure mathematics: algebra, geometry, trigonometry. I flew through it, my pencil scratching across the paper as numbers and equations aligned themselves in my mind like they were meant to be there. The second section was logic puzzles and pattern recognition. Again, it felt natural, almost easy. The final section was applied mathematics, real-world problems that required creative thinking and multiple approaches. When the proctor called time, I felt good. Not confident enough to count on winning, but good enough to know I'd done my best. The results wouldn't be announced for 3 hours while the judges scored everything. My family and I grabbed lunch at a nearby diner. Marcus ordered a huge burger and fries, devouring it with the appetite of someone in perfect health. I picked at my grilled cheese, too nervous to eat. "You looked really focused in there," Marcus said between bites. "I couldn't even understand half the problems when they flashed them on the screen for us to watch." Dad beamed at me. "That's our girl, smart as a whip." Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. "Whatever happens, we're proud of you, honey." but I could see the calculation in their eyes. They were already planning how to use the scholarship money for Marcus's surgery. They'd probably even contacted the scholarship board to ask about converting the award to cash. We returned to the lecture hall for the awards ceremony. The room buzzed with nervous energy as students and families filed in. I sat with my family in the middle section, my leg bouncing with anxiety. The dean of the mathematics department took the stage, a tall woman with steel-grey hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She gave a speech about the importance of mathematical thinking in the modern world, thanking all the participants for their dedication to academic excellence. Then she started announcing the winners in reverse order. Third place, with a score of 287 points out of 300, goes to Michael Chen from Lincoln High School in Portland. Applause erupted as a thin Asian boy made his way to the stage, grinning widely. That was a high score, higher than I'd expected anyone to get. My heart sank a little. Second place, with a score of 291 points, goes to Rebecca Williams from Crater High School in Central Point. More applause. A tall girl with curly red hair practically ran to the stage, pumping her fist. 291 points. That was almost perfect. I'd have to have scored even higher to beat her. And first place with a perfect score of 300 points, the first perfect score we've seen in this competition in 8 years, goes to Vanessa Morrison from Jefferson High School in Portland. The room erupted. My family was screaming and jumping up and down. Mrs. Patterson, who'd driven down separately, was crying in the back row. I walked to the stage in a daze, my legs somehow carrying me forward even though I felt like I was floating. A perfect score. I'd gotten every single problem right. The dean handed me a trophy and an envelope. Congratulations, Vanessa. You've earned a full-ride scholarship to any Oregon State University, renewable for 4 years, covering tuition, room, board, and books. Outstanding work. As I stood on that stage, holding the trophy and looking out at the crowd, I saw my family's faces. Mum was crying happy tears. Dad looked like he might burst with pride. And Marcus. Marcus was smiling, but his eyes were doing mental calculations. I could practically see him figuring out how to redirect that scholarship money. The ride home was euphoric. My parents couldn't stop talking about how proud they were, how I'd done something incredible. Marcus chimed in with congratulations, though I noticed his enthusiasm seemed forced. So, Dad said carefully as we merged onto I-5 North, we'll need to sit down and talk about how to best use this opportunity. There are options we should explore. Like what? I asked, even though I knew exactly what he meant. Well, you could defer the scholarship for a few years. They usually allow that. Or maybe there's a way to structure it so some of the money could be used more immediately for family needs. Family needs. He meant Marcus's fake surgery. I think we should talk to the scholarship board, Marcus added from the back seat. See what flexibility they have. I mean, V's only 15. She's got time before college, but my situation is kind of urgent. I felt a rage building inside me that I'd never experienced before. Here was my brother, sitting 2 feet away, lying through his teeth about having a fatal heart condition, trying to steal money I'd earned through years of hard work. And my parents were helping him do it. Sure, I heard myself say, my voice calm despite the fury inside. We can look into options. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat in my room developing a plan. I needed to expose Marcus, but I had to be smart about it. I needed irrefutable evidence that would force my parents to see the truth. I started by creating a timeline of all Marcus's supposed symptoms and medical appointments. Then I cross-referenced them with his social media posts. On days he claimed to be too weak to get out of bed, he'd posted photos from the gym. On the day of his cardiology appointment, he'd checked in at a movie theater across town. Next, I called the hospital again, this time recording the conversation. Hi, I'm calling to confirm my brother Marcus Morrison's appointment for heart surgery next month. I'm sorry, we have no record of that patient in our system. Can you check under Marcus T. Morrison, birth date April 15th, 2003? I've checked all variations. There's no one by that name in our cardiac surgery schedule. Are you sure you have the right hospital? Very sure, thank you. I had the recording. I had the photos proving his documents were fake. I had the timeline showing his contradictions. Now I just needed the right moment to reveal everything. That moment came 3 days later when Marcus announced he was hosting a fundraiser party for his surgery costs. Marcus's fundraiser party was scheduled for the following Saturday at our house. He'd invited everyone we knew, neighbors, extended family, his friends, even people from my school. He created a Facebook event called Support Marcus, Help Save a Life, and set up a GoFundMe page with a goal of $40,000. The GoFundMe page was slick and professional looking. It featured a photo of Marcus looking pale and exhausted. Later I'd discover he'd used a photo filter to make himself look sick. The description told a heartbreaking story about a young man in his prime, struck down by a cruel genetic disease, needing emergency surgery to survive. He'd even included those fake medical documents, scanned and uploaded for everyone to see. Within 2 days, the fundraiser had raised $8,000. People I'd never even met were donating hundreds of dollars. Mrs. Henderson from across the street brought over a check for $500 with tears in her eyes. Dad's co-workers pooled their money and donated $200. Even my math teacher, Mrs. Patterson, contributed $100 from her modest salary. I watched in horror as the money poured in, knowing every dollar was based on a lie. But I stayed silent, waiting for the party, planning my moment. Mom and Dad went all out preparing for the fundraiser. They cleaned the house top to bottom, rented extra chairs and tables, ordered catering from a local Mexican restaurant. Mom made a poster board with photos of Marcus throughout his life, labeling it, Marcus's Journey, Help Us Keep Him Here. The night before the party, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed rehearsing what I would say, how I would reveal the truth. My stomach churned with anxiety. Part of me wondered if I was making a terrible mistake. What if somehow I was wrong? What if there was an explanation for all the inconsistencies? But no, I'd triple-checked everything. The medical records were fake. The hospital had no record of him. His symptoms didn't match his behavior. He was lying, and he was about to steal thousands of dollars from good, caring people. Saturday arrived with bright sunshine and unseasonably warm February weather. By noon, our house and yard were packed with people. Someone had set up a sound system playing soft background music. The smell of catering trays, carnitas, rice, beans, tortillas filled the air. There was even a dessert table loaded with homemade cakes and cookies that neighbors had brought. Marcus held court in the living room, sitting in Dad's favorite armchair like a king on a throne. He wore a loose-fitting button-down shirt and kept his movements slow and careful, playing the part of someone conserving their limited energy. People approached him one by one, expressing their support, sharing their own stories of health struggles, pressing envelopes and checks into his hands. I watched from the kitchen, pretending to help Mom with the food service, but really just observing, waiting. My phone was in my pocket, loaded with all my evidence, ready to cast to the TV at the right moment. Around 2 p.m., Uncle Richard stood up and tapped his glass with a fork, calling for everyone's attention. Richard was Dad's older brother, a successful contractor who'd always been close to our family. He had a booming voice that carried across the crowded rooms. I want to say a few words about my nephew, Marcus, Richard began, his voice thick with emotion. This young man has shown incredible courage in the face of unimaginable circumstances. At just 19 years old, he's having to confront his own mortality, and he's doing it with grace and strength that humbles me. People nodded and murmured agreement. Some were already tearing up. I've known Marcus since the day he was born, Richard continued. I was there in the hospital, holding him when he was just hours old, and now I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure he gets many more years of life ahead of him. Richard pulled out an envelope. On behalf of my wife Karen and myself, we're donating $5,000 toward Marcus's surgery fund, and I encourage everyone here to give what they can. Every dollar counts. Every dollar brings him one step closer to the treatment he needs. The room erupted in applause. People were crying now, openly emotional. Marcus stood up slowly, carefully, and walked over to hug his uncle. He had tears streaming down his face. Real tears, I had to admit. He was a good actor. Thank you, Marcus said, his voice breaking. Thank you all so much. Your generosity means everything to me and my family. I know the surgery is expensive, but knowing I have this community behind me, it makes me believe I can beat this thing." More applause, more tears. Dad had his arm around Mom, both of them crying. I felt sick to my stomach. This had to end. Now. I walked over to the TV and grabbed the remote. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I connected my phone to the TV via the wireless setup, and the screen flickered to life. "Wait," I said, my voice barely audible over the crowd. I cleared my throat and tried again. "Wait, everyone, I need to show you something." The room gradually quieted. People turned to look at me confused. Mum was frowning, probably worried I was about to embarrass myself somehow. Dad looked concerned. And Marcus's face went pale, his eyes locked on mine with an expression I couldn't quite read. Fear, anger, warning. "What are you doing, V?" he asked quietly. "Showing everyone the truth," I replied, my voice steadier now. I pulled up the first document on my phone, a side-by-side comparison of his fake medical records and the real hospital letterhead I'd obtained from their website. The TV screen split to show both images. Even from across the room, the differences were obvious. The fonts didn't match. The logo was slightly wrong. The layout was amateur. "Marcus's medical documents are fake," I said, my voice carrying across the now silent room. I called the hospital. They have no record of him as a patient. The doctor whose signature is on these forms doesn't exist at that facility. The phone number for his supposed cardiac department is disconnected. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People started murmuring, looking between me, the TV screen, and Marcus. He was standing now, his face red. "Vanessa, what the hell are you doing?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "Are you seriously trying to humiliate me at my own fundraiser? I'm dying, and you're jealous because you can't handle me getting attention for once in your life." "You're not dying," I said calmly, pulling up the next piece of evidence, a photo of him at the gym, dated 2 days ago, the same day he claimed to be too weak to leave his room. "You're lying. You've been lying this entire time." I showed more photos. Marcus playing basketball. Marcus at the movies. Marcus eating a huge meal at Buffalo Wild Wings when he'd told our parents the medication made him too nauseous to eat. "This is from your own Instagram account," I said. "These are your own posts, showing you living your normal life on days you claim to be bedridden." Mom stood up, her face pale. "Vanessa, honey, this isn't the time." "When is the time, Mom?" I interrupted, shocked by my own boldness. "When he's collected $40,000 from people who believed his lies. When Mrs. Henderson has given up her grocery money for the month. When Mrs. Patterson donated money she needs for her own bills. When Uncle Richard just gave him $5,000. I pulled up the timeline I'd created, displaying it on the TV. Each of Marcus's claimed symptoms and appointments cross-referenced with proof that he was doing something else entirely. February 3rd, claimed to have a cardiology appointment at 2 p.m. Actually checked in at Century 16 Theatre to see the new Marvel movie. February 7th, said he was admitted to the hospital overnight for monitoring. Posted a photo from Jake's house party that same night. February 10th, told everyone he was starting physical therapy for his heart. Went to Dave & Buster's and posted videos of himself playing arcade games for 3 hours. The room was completely silent now except for my voice. People were staring at the evidence, then at Marcus, then back at the evidence. I could see understanding dawning on their faces, followed by anger. "This is ridiculous," Marcus said, his voice rising. "She's photoshopped these. She's making this up because she's jealous. Ever since she won that stupid math competition, she's been insufferable. She can't stand that I'm getting attention now." "I called the hospital and recorded the conversation," I said, playing the audio on the TV. The woman's voice was clear. "We have no record of that patient in our system." Uncle Richard stood up, his face darkening. "Marcus, is this true? Have you been lying about being sick?" "No!" Marcus shouted. "This is insane! She's trying to destroy me because she's always hated me. She's a psycho!" But his voice was too loud, too defensive. Even I could hear the panic in it. "Then explain the medical records," I said quietly. "Explain why the hospital logo doesn't match. Explain why your supposed doctor doesn't exist. Explain why you're playing basketball when you claim to have a heart condition that could kill you with any strenuous activity. Marcus looked around the room desperately, searching for anyone who believed him, but the faces staring back were skeptical now, some angry, some hurt, all confused. Dad walked slowly over to Marcus. His face was hard, his jaw set in a way I'd never seen before. "Son," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "look me in the eye and tell me the truth. Do you have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy?" Marcus's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. His eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal looking for escape. "Answer me!" Dad roared, louder than I'd ever heard him yell in my life. Marcus started, then stopped. I could see the exact moment he realized the game was over. His shoulders slumped. The confident facade crumbled. "No," he whispered. "No, I don't." The room exploded with noise, people shouting, crying, demanding explanations. Uncle Richard's face was purple with rage. Mrs. Henderson burst into tears. People started heading for the door, grabbing coats, muttering angrily. Mom sank back into her chair, her face in her hands, sobbing. Dad just stood there, frozen, staring at Marcus like he'd never seen him before. "Why?" Dad finally asked, his voice broken. "Why would you do this?" Marcus's face contorted with rage. "Because nobody ever pays attention to me. It's always about Vanessa. Vanessa's so smart. Vanessa got straight A's. Vanessa won the competition. Vanessa's going to an Ivy League school someday. What about me? What about what I want?" "You wanted attention," I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. "So you decided to fake a terminal illness and steal money from people who cared about you." "You don't understand," Marcus yelled. "You've never understood. Everything's always been so easy for you. School, friends, achievements, it all just comes naturally. I have to work for everything and I'm still invisible. This was supposed to be my moment where people finally saw me." "They saw you," Uncle Richard said coldly from near the door. "We all saw you. We saw a liar and a thief. That's what we saw." Marcus turned to our parents, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, Dad, please, I'm sorry, I needed everyone to know I mattered too. I needed to matter." Mom looked up at him, her face a mask of grief and disappointment. "You've always mattered," she said quietly. "We've always loved you just as much as your sister. But this, Marcus, this is unforgivable. You lied to everyone who cares about you. You stole from people who can't afford to lose that money. You tried to take your sister's scholarship, something she earned, for your selfish fantasy." The party cleared out quickly after that. People left angry, some demanding their donations back, others just too shocked and hurt to say anything. Uncle Richard told Dad he wanted his $5,000 returned by the end of the month, or we'll have a different kind of conversation. Mrs. Henderson left crying, muttering about needing that money for her own medications. By 4 p.m., it was just our family and the wreckage of Marcus's lies. The house was a mess, half-eaten food, abandoned drinks, the donation box sitting on the table with thousands of dollars that would all need to be returned. Dad took charge with cold efficiency. "Marcus, you're going to return every single dollar that was donated. You're going to call everyone who contributed and apologize. You're going to post a public apology on that GoFundMe page and explain exactly what you did. And then you're going to move out." "Move out?" Marcus looked shocked. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't care," Dad said flatly. "You're an adult. You figure it out. But you're not staying in this house. Not after what you've done." "Dad, please." "Get out!" Dad bellowed. "Get out of my sight before I do something I regret." Marcus looked at Mom, pleading, but she just shook her head and turned away. He looked at me last, and I saw pure hatred in his eyes. "This is all your fault," he hissed at me. "You ruined my life. I'll never forgive you for this." "I didn't ruin your life," I replied quietly. "You did that all by yourself." He stormed upstairs and we could hear him throwing things around his room, packing. 20 minutes later, he came down with 2 duffel bags of clothes. He walked out the front door without looking back, and we heard his car start and drive away. The house felt empty and wrong. Mum was still crying. Dad stood at the window watching Marcus's car disappear down the street. I sat on the couch, emotionally exhausted, wondering if I'd done the right thing. You did the right thing, Dad said, as if reading my mind. He turned from the window to look at me. I know it doesn't feel that way right now, but you exposed the truth. That took courage. I feel terrible, I admitted. I know he was lying, but he's still my brother. And everyone saw. Everyone knows now. Mom came over and sat next to me, pulling me into a hug. She smelled like her usual lavender perfume mixed with tears. This isn't your fault, sweetie. Marcus made his choices. You just refused to let him hurt people with his lies. That was the right thing to do, even though it was hard. That night, I lay in bed unable to sleep. I kept replaying the moment Marcus's face changed when he realized he was caught. The rage in his eyes when he looked at me. His words, "I'll never forgive you for this." Despite everything, part of me still loved my brother, still wanted a relationship with him, and I'd just destroyed any possibility of that happening. The week after the party was brutal. News of Marcus's deception spread through our community like wildfire. It was the only thing anyone wanted to talk about. At school, I was simultaneously pitied and praised. Some people thought I was brave for exposing him. Others thought I was cruel for humiliating my own brother publicly. The local newspaper even ran a story. Teen exposes brother's fake illness, fundraising scam. They interviewed several donors who felt betrayed. Mrs. Henderson was quoted saying, "I gave money I needed for my own prescriptions because I thought I was helping save a young man's life. Now I don't know if I can afford my blood pressure medication this month." Reading that quote made me feel physically ill. Yes, Marcus had started the lie, but I'd chosen to expose it in the most public, dramatic way possible. Maybe there had been a better way to handle it. Dad spent days calling every single person who donated, explaining what happened and arranging to return their money. The GoFundMe page was shut down and all online donations were refunded. Uncle Richard got his $5,000 check back, though he refused to speak to Dad beyond that transaction. The incident had fractured our extended family with various aunts, uncles and cousins taking sides. Some family members blamed Marcus entirely. Others thought I'd been unnecessarily cruel in how I'd revealed the truth. A few even suggested that maybe Marcus really was sick and I'd misunderstood the evidence. These were the same people who'd never liked me being smarter than everyone else anyway. Marcus moved in with his friend Jake, sleeping on a couch in a cramped apartment shared by 3 guys. He refused all contact with our family. Mom tried calling him dozens of times, but he never answered. She left tearful voicemails asking him to come home, promising we could work through this, but he never called back. 2 weeks after the party, I won another academic award, this time a regional science fair competition with my project on algorithm optimization. It was a significant achievement, but there was no celebration at home. Mom and Dad congratulated me quietly, gave me a hug, but the joy that should have accompanied it was missing. The shadow of what happened with Marcus hung over everything. Mrs. Patterson pulled me aside after school one day in late March. "Vanessa, I'm concerned about you," she said, her kind eyes studying my face. "You look exhausted. Are you sleeping?" I hadn't been. Every night I lay awake thinking about Marcus, wondering where he was, if he was okay, if he hated me. "I'm fine," I lied. "You exposed something that needed to be exposed," she said firmly. "You saved people from being defrauded. That took remarkable courage. But I imagine it also took a toll. Have you considered talking to someone? The school counselor is excellent." I promised I'd think about it, though I had no intention of following through. I didn't want to talk about my feelings. I wanted to focus on schoolwork, on concrete problems with definite solutions. Emotions were messy and complicated, but my grades started slipping anyway. My focus was gone. I'd sit in class staring at equations that used to make sense, but now they just looked like meaningless symbols. I stopped raising my hand to answer questions. I turned in homework late. My perfect 4.0 GPA dropped to a 3.7, then a 3.5. Mom noticed but didn't push. She was dealing with her own grief over losing Marcus. I'd hear her crying in her bedroom at night. Dad threw himself into work, taking extra shifts to avoid being home in the house that felt so empty now. In mid-April, I came home from school to find Mom sitting at the kitchen table with an official-looking letter. Her face was pale, her eyes red. "What's wrong?" I asked, dropping my backpack. She slid the letter across to me. It was from the scholarship board. They were conducting an investigation into whether I'd used unethical means to discredit a family member in order to secure scholarship funding. Someone had filed a complaint claiming I'd fabricated evidence against Marcus to ensure I could keep my prize money. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Who would? But I knew who. Marcus. Even from a distance, he was still trying to hurt me, still trying to take away my achievements. "We'll fight this," Mom said, her voice shaking but determined. "We'll provide all your evidence, show them everything. They'll see the truth." But I wasn't so sure. What if they didn't believe me? What if they thought I'd doctored the evidence? Marcus had been convincing enough to fool dozens of people for weeks. Why couldn't he convince the scholarship board that I was the real villain? I spent the next week gathering additional documentation. I got official statements from the hospital confirming Marcus had never been a patient. I compiled more social media evidence showing his active lifestyle during his supposed illness. I even found the website where he'd likely gotten his fake medical document template, a sketchy online service that generated realistic-looking forms for novelty purposes. The scholarship board scheduled a hearing for early May. Both Marcus and I were required to attend and present our cases. It would be the first time I'd seen him since he left. The hearing was held in a conference room at the State Education Department building in Salem. It was a grey, bureaucratic space with fluorescent lights and industrial carpeting. A panel of 5 people sat behind a long table. Administrators, educators, a lawyer. Marcus and I sat on opposite ends of the room with our parents between us. Marcus looked different, thinner, older somehow. His face was hard, his jaw set. He wouldn't look at me. The hearing started with the panel chair, a stern woman in her 60s named Dr. Carlyle, explaining the process. Each of us would present our case, then they'd ask questions. Then they'd deliberate and issue a decision within 2 weeks. Marcus went first. His story was carefully constructed. He claimed he'd been dealing with anxiety and depression after struggling in community college. In a moment of poor judgment, he'd exaggerated some health symptoms to get attention from our family. He admitted he shouldn't have done it, but said I'd taken minor lies and blown them completely out of proportion, fabricating additional evidence to make him look worse than he was. "My sister has always been competitive," he said, his voice steady and reasonable. "She couldn't handle me being in the spotlight for once. When she saw an opportunity to destroy my credibility and ensure her scholarship was secure, she took it. She doctored documents, created fake phone call recordings, even staged photographs. All to make me look like some kind of monster when really I was just a depressed kid making a stupid mistake. It was masterfully done. He admitted to some wrongdoing, making himself look honest, while framing me as the real villain. Several panel members were nodding along with his story. Then it was my turn. I presented everything methodically. The fake medical documents with their obvious errors. The hospital's official statement that he'd never been a patient. The timeline of contradictions. The recorded phone call from before the party, proving I hadn't fabricated evidence after the fact. The social media posts with timestamps. I also presented the GoFundMe page he'd created and the donation records showing he'd collected over $8,000 from generous people based on his lies. I showed emails from donors who felt betrayed and hurt. "This wasn't a minor exaggeration blown out of proportion," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "This was a calculated, sustained deception designed to defraud people of thousands of dollars. My brother created fake medical documents, maintained an elaborate fiction for weeks, and was prepared to let my scholarship money be used for his supposed surgery. I didn't expose this out of jealousy or competitiveness. I exposed it because it was wrong." The panel asked questions for over an hour. They grilled me about how I'd obtained certain evidence, legally from public sources and his own social media. They questioned my motives, protecting my scholarship, yes, but also preventing my family and community from being defrauded. They asked why I'd waited until the party to reveal everything, to gather enough evidence that the truth would be undeniable. They asked Marcus about specific contradictions in his story that he couldn't explain. About the exact source of his medical documents. He claimed a family friend who was a nurse had given them to him, but couldn't provide her name. About why he'd continued accepting donations even after collecting thousands. He claimed he was trying to figure out how to return the money. His answers got weaker as the questioning continued. I could see the panel members' expressions shifting from neutral to skeptical. After both presentations, we were dismissed while the panel deliberated privately. Marcus left immediately without speaking to anyone. Mom, Dad, and I waited in the building's lobby, sitting on uncomfortable plastic chairs, not talking. 90 minutes later, we were called back in. Dr. Carlisle's face was grave as she looked at both of us. After reviewing all the evidence and testimony presented today, she said formally, this panel has reached a unanimous decision. We find that Ms. Vanessa Morrison's scholarship was earned through legitimate academic achievement and that her subsequent investigation into her brother's claims was conducted appropriately. We find no evidence that Ms. Morrison fabricated or manipulated evidence, and considerable evidence that Mr. Marcus Morrison engaged in deliberate deception. I felt my whole body sag with relief. The scholarship was secure. My future was secure. Dr. Carlisle continued. However, we also want to acknowledge the difficult position Ms. Morrison was placed in. She was forced to choose between protecting her own legitimate interests and maintaining family harmony. She chose truth over comfort. That took courage. Ms. Morrison, your scholarship stands. Mr. Morrison, this matter is closed as far as this board is concerned, though we strongly recommend you seek professional help to address the underlying issues that led to this situation. Marcus stood abruptly and walked out without a word. The door slammed behind him. That night, Dad tried calling Marcus to tell him he should come home, that we could work on rebuilding trust, that we were still family. The number was disconnected. Marcus had changed his phone and hadn't given us the new number. Summer arrived, and with it a strange new rhythm to life. I got a job at a local coffee shop to save money for college. Mom started seeing a therapist to deal with her grief over Marcus. Dad joined a support group for parents of troubled adult children. We were all trying to heal in our own ways. The scholarship board's vindication had helped, but I still felt guilty. Not for exposing Marcus, I knew that had been necessary, but for how I'd done it. I replayed that party in my mind constantly, wondering if I could have found a more private way to reveal the truth. Could I have told my parents first, given Marcus a chance to confess on his own? Mrs. Patterson recommended I start seeing her friend, Dr. Sarah Chen, a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and teen mental health. After weeks of Mom gently suggesting it, I finally agreed to go. Dr. Chen's office was nothing like I expected. Instead of a clinical space, it felt like someone's cozy living room, soft lighting, comfortable chairs, plants everywhere. She was a petite woman in her 40s with warm eyes and a calm presence that immediately put me at ease. "Tell me about Marcus," she said in our first session, after we'd covered the basics of why I was there. I told her everything. The years of competition, the bike incident, the fake illness, the party, the aftermath. She listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just letting me talk. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're carrying a lot of guilt about exposing your brother's lies." "I humiliated him in front of everyone," I said, tears starting to flow. "I destroyed his reputation. I turned my whole family against him. Maybe I should have found another way." "Let me ask you something," Dr. Chen said gently. "If you'd confronted him privately first, what do you think would have happened?" I thought about it. He would have denied everything. Probably would have come up with some explanation. Maybe even doubled down on the lies. And if you'd told just your parents? They wouldn't have believed me without overwhelming proof. They'd already chosen to believe him over me when I tried to raise concerns. So you gathered evidence until it was undeniable, then revealed it in a context where Marcus couldn't control the narrative or manipulate the situation. That sounds like you made a strategic decision based on past experience with how your family dynamic worked. Put that way, it sounded less cruel, but I still felt the weight of it. Over the following months, therapy helped me work through the complex feelings. Dr. Chen helped me understand that I could hold two truths at once. What I did was necessary, and it caused pain. I wasn't responsible for Marcus's choices, but I was responsible for mine. I'd chosen public exposure because it seemed like the only way to stop him, and that choice had consequences. The question isn't whether you made the perfect choice, Dr. Chen said in one session. The question is whether you made the best choice you could with the information and options you had at the time. Can you forgive yourself for being an imperfect human in an impossible situation? That question stayed with me for weeks. Meanwhile, life continued. I started my junior year of high school with renewed focus. My grades recovered. I joined the robotics club and discovered I loved building things as much as solving theoretical problems. I made new friends who didn't know anything about the Marcus situation and just saw me as Vanessa, not that girl who exposed her brother. Around Thanksgiving, almost 9 months after the party, Mom got a phone call from Marcus's friend, Jake. Marcus had been in a car accident, nothing life-threatening, but he'd broken his leg and needed surgery. Real surgery this time. Jake thought we should know. Mom and Dad immediately wanted to rush to the hospital. I hesitated. What if he doesn't want us there? He's our son, Dad said simply. He's your brother. He might not want us, but we're going anyway. We drove to Portland General Hospital in near silence. Mom kept twisting her hands in her lap. Dad's jaw was set with determination. I stared out the window, my stomach churning with anxiety. Marcus was in a recovery room when we arrived, his left leg in a cast from ankle to thigh. He looked shocked to see us walk in. Then his face hardened. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice cold. "We heard about your accident," Mom said, her voice breaking. "We wanted to make sure you were okay." "Well, I'm fine. You can leave now." But he wasn't fine. I could see it in his eyes. He looked exhausted, defeated, older than his 19 years. There were dark circles under his eyes and a hollowness to his cheeks that spoke of missed meals and sleepless nights. Dad pulled up a chair and sat down despite Marcus's obvious hostility. "We're not leaving," he said quietly. "You can be angry at us. You can refuse to talk to us, but we're staying." Marcus turned his face to the wall, refusing to look at us. For 20 minutes, we sat in silence. Mom alternated between crying quietly and trying to busy herself adjusting Marcus's blankets or refilling his water cup. He rejected every attempt at care, pushing her hands away without speaking. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. "Marcus, I'm sorry." He turned to look at me, his eyes blazing with anger. "You're sorry? You destroyed my life, turned everyone against me, took away my family, and you're sorry?" "I'm sorry for how I did it," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not sorry for exposing your lies. That needed to happen. But I'm sorry I did it so publicly. I'm sorry I humiliated you. I could have found a better way." "There was no better way," he spat back. "You wanted to hurt me and you succeeded. Congratulations, V. You won. Again." "I didn't want to hurt you," I said, tears streaming down my face now. "I wanted you to stop lying. I wanted to protect people from being defrauded. But yeah, I also wanted to keep my scholarship. I earned it, Marcus. I worked for years for that achievement, and you tried to take it away with a fake illness. How was I supposed to react?" "You were supposed to be my sister," he shouted, his voice breaking. "You were supposed to have my back, not ruin my life." "And you were supposed to be my brother," I shouted back. "You were supposed to be happy for my achievements, not try to sabotage them. You threw my bike in front of a truck when I was 12, Marcus. You've been trying to hurt me for years." The room fell silent. Mom was openly sobbing now. Dad had his head in his hands. Marcus's anger seemed to deflate suddenly. His face crumpled and he started crying. Really crying, the way he hadn't since we were kids. "I know," he whispered. "I know I've been terrible to you. I don't know how to stop being jealous. I don't know how to be happy for you when everything's always been so easy for you and so hard for me." "It hasn't been easy," I said quietly, sitting down on the edge of his hospital bed. "You made sure of that? But yeah, school comes naturally to me. I can't help that any more than you can help being good at other things." He laughed bitterly. "What am I good at, V? What's my special talent? Being a liar? Being a manipulator? Ruining my own life? I thought about it. You're good with people when you're not trying to manipulate them. You're charismatic. You're creative. The way you constructed that whole fake illness story was twisted, but it showed creativity and attention to detail. You're good at reading people, understanding what they need to hear. Those are actual skills, Marcus. You've just been using them in terrible ways. He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, Jake made me start seeing a therapist. Court-ordered after I got caught shoplifting last month. I hadn't known about the shoplifting, Mom gasped. Dad looked like he'd been punched. I've been not doing well, Marcus continued quietly. After everything happened, I couldn't find a job. No one would hire me once they knew who I was. I was living on Jake's couch, eating ramen, stealing food when I couldn't afford it. The therapist thinks I have some kind of personality disorder. Maybe narcissism, maybe something else. She's still evaluating. That's actually good, Mom said through her tears. Getting help is good. We'll support you through that, sweetie. We'll help however we can. I don't deserve your help, Marcus said, but he was looking at her now instead of the wall. Maybe not, Dad said, but you're getting it anyway because that's what families do. But Marcus, you need to understand, we can't go back to how things were. Trust has to be rebuilt. You have to prove you're actually changing, and it's going to take time. A long time. Marcus nodded slowly. He looked at me again, and this time there was something different in his eyes. Not hatred. Maybe the beginning of understanding. I really am sorry, he said to me, for everything. The bike, trying to steal your scholarship, all of it. I was so consumed by jealousy that I couldn't see how messed up I was being. You didn't ruin my life, I did that myself. You just held up a mirror and made me see what I'd become. I wanted to believe him, but Dr. Chen had taught me to be cautious, to watch actions rather than words. Okay, I said simply. Let's see where this goes. We stayed at the hospital for another hour. The conversation was stilted and awkward, but it was a start. When we left, Marcus actually said goodbye instead of just turning his back. Over the following months, Marcus worked with his therapist and slowly started rebuilding his life. He got a job at a warehouse doing inventory and shipping. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. He moved into his own studio apartment. He attended family dinners once a month, supervised at first, then gradually without that requirement, as he proved he could handle it. The healing wasn't linear. There were setbacks and arguments. Sometimes old patterns would emerge. Marcus would make a passive-aggressive comment about my achievements, or I'd be too quick to assume the worst about his motives. But we were trying. My senior year of high school flew by. I was accepted early decision to MIT with a full scholarship package, combining my state award with university grants. The day the acceptance letter came, I told Marcus about it separately before announcing it to the family. I wanted to give him a chance to process his feelings privately. That's amazing, V, he said when I called him. Seriously, I'm proud of you. And for once, I believed him. The graduation ceremony was bittersweet. Marcus came and sat with our parents. When they called my name as valedictorian, he stood up and cheered louder than anyone. After the ceremony, he pulled me aside. I have something for you, he said, handing me a small wrapped box. Inside was a silver bracelet with a tiny charm in the shape of an infinity symbol. It's from both of us, he said awkwardly, from who we were as kids and who we're trying to become now. Infinite possibilities, infinite chances to get it right. I put it on immediately. Thank you, I said, and hugged him for the first time in over 2 years. That summer before college, Marcus and I actually spent time together. Not forced family dinners, but genuine hangouts. We got coffee a few times, went to a Trailblazers game, watched movies at his apartment, learning to be siblings again from scratch, without all the history weighing us down. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes I still felt anxious around him, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Sometimes he'd get that look in his eyes, the jealous one, and I'd tense up. But he was working on it in therapy, learning to recognize and manage those feelings before they turned into destructive actions. The night before I left for MIT, we had a family dinner at a nice restaurant downtown. Marcus gave a toast. To my little sister, who's going to change the world with her brilliant brain, and who had the courage to call me out when I needed it most, even when it cost her. I'm sorry for everything I put you through, V, and I'm proud of who you've become despite my best efforts to drag you down. We all cried, even Dad, who never cried. At MIT, I threw myself into my studies and discovered a passion for artificial intelligence and machine learning. I made friends, joined clubs, experienced the normal struggles and triumphs of college life. But I also kept in regular contact with my family, including Marcus. He continued therapy and slowly built a life he was proud of. After 2 years at the warehouse, he enrolled in business classes at community college. He discovered he was actually good at marketing and sales when he used his people skills ethically. He got a job at a small marketing firm and thrived. 3 years after the infamous party, Marcus called me at school. "Hey V, I wanted you to be the first to know. I got promoted to junior account manager. It's not a huge deal, but it's the first real professional achievement I've earned, honestly. No lies, no manipulation, just hard work." "That's incredible, Marcus," I said, genuinely happy for him. "I'm proud of you." "Thanks. And V, thank you for not letting me get away with it, for holding up that mirror even when it was painful. I wouldn't be here without that wake-up call." Looking back now, I can see how that terrible period shaped all of us. Mom and Dad learned to see their children more clearly, to not enable destructive behavior in the name of love. Marcus learned that he couldn't lie and manipulate his way to happiness, that real achievements meant more than fake ones. And I learned that sometimes doing the right thing meant being willing to be the villain in someone else's story, at least temporarily. We're not a perfect family. We probably never will be. But we're honest now. We're real. And maybe that's more valuable than perfect. Marcus and I will never have the sibling relationship I dreamed about as a kid. Too much has happened. Too much hurt has been caused. But we're building something new, a relationship based on mutual respect and hard-earned trust rather than obligation and fantasy. And you know what? That's enough. That's more than enough. Sometimes the price of truth is paid in broken relationships and public humiliation. Sometimes doing the right thing costs more than we want to pay. But in the end, a foundation built on lies will always crumble. Better to tear it down and start over than to keep building on something rotten. I wear Marcus's infinity bracelet every day now. It reminds me that we all have infinite capacity for growth, infinite opportunities to choose better. We just have to be brave enough to take them.